Bueno, sí, piensa en oración conmigo. Padre, gracias por esta mañana que podemos reunirnos. Pido que nos bendigas mientras cubrimos estos dos capítulos de Apocalipsis. Ayúdanos en nuestro entendimiento, ayúdanos a recibir el ánimo, pero también el temor que han de haber recibido los primeros cristianos que recibieron estas visiones. Pido que nos dé sabiduría para aplicar y honrarte a ti, conociendo que tú estás en control. Pido esto en el nombre de Jesús. Amén. Bueno. En español hasta que lleguen, ¿verdad? ¿Verdad? Ok. Aquí hemos acabado ya las 7 letras, de verdad, qué fácil ya. Si ¿Ah? 7 cartas, ¿qué dije? ¿Letras? ¿No es lo mismo? No, vale. Bueno, 7 cartas. Pero esta es la clase 18 y imagínate que solo hemos cubrido 2 capítulos hasta entonces. Pero no, ya vamos a ir. La meta principal era, quería ir bien alto, no quería ir en mucho detalle para tener la idea grande. Todo que vamos a regresar un poco más hacia esa meta. Pues verdad que sí, aunque no me crean, es lo que digo aquí. Aunque no me crean, siento que hemos tenido éxito en esa meta de no meternos tanto en los detallitos ahí, porque había mucho más que podríamos hacer. Sí nos hicimos espacio un poco para las 7 cartas, porque porque había muchas cosas que eran interesantes. Okay, back to English. There was a lot of things that were really interesting, and lots of details that, as I looked at it, like it's gonna go back into the book of Revelation a lot. So I'm glad we spent more time in the letters there. But now, I think going in depth for the 7 churches will prepare us better for the rest of the book. Cool, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we've been going over book of Revelation, class 18. We're just finished chapter 2. We're actually going to be going a lot faster now. There was just a lot of other introductory stuff there. So if you do have any questions, please ask. I know we've kind of done a lot of prep work to get here, and Revelation is just one of those books. But yeah, let me know any questions at all. I think all of us would probably benefit from even a little recap. So we'll lean more into my initial goal of I don't want to spend too much time going into details. We could do that, but I think for a first go over, we want to go a little high level. So today we're actually covering 2 chapters. These chapters cover what is commonly called the throne scene of Revelation, or the throne room scene. We're going to be read both chapters in a moment, which is just 25 verses, but I want us to keep a few things in mind as we read these 2 chapters. So far, we have had John's introduction and then the letters to 7 churches. That's been within our first 3 chapters of Revelation. Okay, we're going through 3 chapters. We've only had his introduction and the letters to 7 churches. We now have a major scene change in the letter. This is signaled by a few things. John saying, after these things is kind of a phrase in Revelation where we see something else changing pretty often there. Also, we're getting worship. We're getting clearly John talking about his vision here. So it's a major scene change. And this is, you could say this is almost the beginning of John's vision. He had visions and talking about the letters that came to him and Jesus appearing to him early on. But this almost feels like another introduction, if you will. 3 things I want us to specifically keep in mind as we consider this throne room scene. I should have put throne room. 3 things I want us to remember about that. We're covering Revelation 4-5, by the way. So I want us to consider the Old Testament. I want us to consider the letters to the 7 churches and the circumstances of the 7 churches. As we've already seen, Revelation, understanding the Old Testament helps us so much in interpreting Revelation. I don't understand it super well, which is why I've had to do a lot of studying for this book, but it really helps us out. The letters, the 7 churches, the more I study, I really think we need to keep these 7 churches and those letters in mind throughout the rest of the book. We already talked about, at the very end of each letter, Jesus will say, the one who overcomes, I will give this. And there is an aspect of that promise all the way at the end of Revelation, and even sprinkled in through the rest of the book near the middle area. So we'll keep in mind these 7 churches, their circumstances, and the promises, and the blessing for those that overcome. And also, as I said, the letters, and of course the circumstances, which is they're persecuting. They're struggling with whether or not they will be faithful. I also want you to notice the honor given to God and then the honor given to the Lamb within these chapters. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and read. Vamos a leer los capítulos 4 o 5. After these things I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven, and the first voice which I had heard, like the sound of a trumpet speaking with me, said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after these things." Immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was standing in heaven, and someone was sitting on the throne. And he who was sitting was like a jasper stone, and sardius in appearance, and there was a rainbow around the throne, like an emerald in appearance. Around the throne were 24 thrones. Now upon the thrones I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white garments, and golden crowns on their heads. Out of the throne came flashes of lightning, sounds and peals of thunder, and there were 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. And before the throne there was something like a sea of glass, like crystal in the center around the throne. 4 living creatures, full of eyes in front and behind. The first living creature was like a lion, the second creature like a calf. The third creature had a face like that of a man, and the fourth creature was like a flying eagle. And the 4 living creatures, each of them having 6 wings, are full of eyes around and within, and days and nights they do not cease to say, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God the Almighty, who was and who is to come." And when the living creatures give glory, honor, and thanks to him who sits on the throne, to him who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders will fall down before him who sits on the throne, and they will worship him who lives forever and ever, and will cast their crowns before the throne, saying, "Worthy are you, our Lord and our God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and because of your will they existed and were created." I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written inside and on the back, sealed up with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the throne and to break its seals?" And no one in heaven or on the earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look into it. Then I began to weep greatly, because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. And one of the elders said to me, Stop weeping. Behold, the Lion that is from the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has overcome, so as to be able to open the scroll and its 7 seals. And I saw between the throne with the 4 living creatures and the elders a lamb standing as if slaughtered, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. And he came and took the scroll out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne. Then when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each one of them holding a harp, a golden bowl full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song, saying, "Worthy are you to take the scroll and to break its seals, for you were slaughtered, and you purchased people for God with your blood from every tribe, language, people, and nation. You have made them into a kingdom and priests to our God, and they will reign upon the earth." And then I looked and heard the voices of many angels around the throne, and the living creatures and the elders, and the number of them was myriads of myriads and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, "Worthy is the Lamb that was slaughtered to receive power, wealth, wisdom, might, honor, glory, and blessing." And I heard every creature, every created thing which is in heaven or on the earth or under the earth or on the sea, and all things in them, saying, "To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be the blessing, the glory, the honor, the glory, and dominion forever and ever." And the 4 living creatures were saying, "Amen." And the elders fell down and worshipped. All right, Revelation 4 and 5. There's a lot, truly a lot we could cover within these 2 chapters. I know that I actually didn't take as many notes on these sections as I wanted to, so I probably meant to talk about some things that I ended up forgetting to talk about. As I was reading, I was already thinking of some things I didn't include in my slides. So if I go a little bit off the slides, that's just what's going on there. Let's start with a general outline. We have in this scene John entering heaven in the Spirit. John is before a throne with someone sitting on it. There's also 24 thrones that surround the main throne with the elders sitting on the thrones. Around the throne were 4 living creatures praising God, and the elders worship and lay down their crowns before the throne. The one on the throne has a scroll with 7 seals. This is chapter 5. And no one is found who is worthy to open it. An elder tells John that the Lion can open it. John sees the Lamb who grabs the scroll, and the elders and the living creatures worship the Lamb who is worthy. So that's our kind of outline here. There's a few parallels, and I kind of wrote it in a particular way to point out certain things, but we'll explicitly talk about that later on in class. There's probably some other details that I could have added to my outline, but that's what I'm going to go with for now. If there's anything you guys want to point out that really stands out, yeah, please, absolutely. In fact, before I give you some of the notes, what else to you guys, what stands out about the scene? What really makes you think? Because the first Christians that were hearing or reading this, something stood out to them, and they probably were supposed to.
Like the 24 thrones,
Mhm.
elders with crowns, at the end they just like give the crowns of worship to one of the first thrones.
Yeah, they have crowns, but they lay them down and worship God. Yeah, this thing was interesting to me because as I've talked about earlier in Revelation, but also in other classes, I've really been curious about this idea of that we are supposed to be reigning as well. Like obviously God is king, but so many times we're given this promise to reign, with Christ. That's part of one of the promises given to one of the 7 churches. We see that in the book of Matthew. We see that in different parts. So there is this theology. You can go all the way back to Adam and Eve, who are supposed to subdue the earth and to rule it, and this kingly, queenly sort of roles that they have here. So, but in that, and you're wondering how are we supposed to rule if isn't Christ supposed to be king? And yes, of course he is, but he allows us to reign, to rule in certain capacity. But we in humility always, these elders, they take off their own crowns and show their own submission to the true king. Anything else? It's a crazy scene, to be honest. I'd be freaking out if I were John. All right, let's talk about something, a little tangent here, but probably noteworthy to do. Before we get to some notes, I want to make a note about 4:1. And this class specifically is very hard to bring new people into because I have no clue how much you guys have studied the book in your own times, in your own life. So I spent so much introduction just talking about different views of Revelation and clarifying some of that. And while I'm taking an idealist approach to the book, if you're familiar with that, I'm going to point out and make comments about other views throughout, either things that I strongly agree with or disagree with or think they have a point on. So, and this is one of those cases. Revelation 4:1 says, "After these things I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven, and the first voice which I had heard, like the sound of a trumpet speaking with me, said, 'Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after these things,'" after the 7 letters to the 7 churches. Some have thought that the voice, which is like the sound of a trumpet, is the trumpet of God from Christ's second coming. In 1 Thessalonians, Paul says, "For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, and with the voice of the archangel, and with the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise." This is what many people call parousia, the second coming, however you want to do it. But some people conflate this. If you take this view of the rapture, that when you have in Revelation 4:1, that's what's going on here. However, Revelation 4:1 only tells us that it's likened to a trumpet, but it's actually just a heavenly voice. It's actually a voice John has already heard back in chapter 1. Revelation 1:10 says, "I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice like the sound of a trumpet." The same language that's used in 4:1. And if you read later on in chapter 1 of Revelation, we're told that that's the voice of Jesus, who's saying all of these things about himself. I bring this up because some believe chapter 4 is the beginning of the rapture, where believers will be taken to heaven. We definitely do not need to make that assumption. I have previously talked about common rapture views. Heck, you could say that everyone believes in the rapture, but how you define rapture is very different. Some people would say the second coming. If you want to say that we believe in rapture, or that I'll speak for myself. If you would say that I believe in the rapture, I would say the rapture is the same thing as the second coming. There's no in-between period where people just kind of disappear there. But that's a very common view that's still that's held to this day, maybe the most common view at a popular level. So I want to point that out because, yes, there is a voice like the sound of a trumpet, but we really don't have to make that connection the way Paul puts it. And if you do believe that, and you think the 7 letters have happened, and some people believe the 7 letters are the ages of churches, again, I don't think we need to be there, but we've kind of covered that ground before. So I just wanted to make that note there. If you have any questions or anything else I think I'm being unfair about, please bring it up. But I do feel a need to bring out certain things, especially points of that popularly come up when speaking about Revelation. All right, with that being said, I want us to keep 4 things in mind for this scene. Isaiah 6, Ezekiel 1, Daniel 7, and traditional emperor presentations. All of you should be well acquainted with these 4 things. That's a joke. You might be acquainted with some of these things. Isaiah 6 is the popular, I'm a man of unclean lips scene. Ezekiel, when he's supposed to be a priest, he has this vision of the heaven. Daniel 7 is the famous passage of the Son of Man coming to the clouds of heaven that Jesus alludes to so many times within the Gospels. So we're familiar with a number of these things, but they all really inform our understanding of this scene in chapters 4 and 5. So I'm going to go through that. It might sound strange, but all these inform our understanding of Revelations 4 and 5. The depth of this class will not allow us to fully explore all of these things, but I wanted to at least read the scriptures I've pointed out. So as I read Ezekiel, Isaiah, Daniel, and then to talk about the emperor stuff, just keep what we've read in chapters 4 and 5 in mind. This will be a bit longer, and I'll just do it myself, just to kind of speed through it. If I had more time, I'd love for you guys to be included, but we'll find other ways. So, Ezekiel 1. Now it came about in the 30th year on the 5th day of the 4th month, while I was by the river Chebar among the exiles. The heavens were opened, and I saw visions of God. On the 5th of the month, in the 5th year of King Jehoiachin's exile, the word of the Lord came expressly to Ezekiel the priest, son of Buzi, in the land of the Chaldeans by the river Chebar, and as the hand of the Lord came upon him. As I looked, behold, a high wind was coming from the north, and a great cloud with fire flashing intermittently, and bright lights around it, and in the midst something like gleaming metal in the midst of the fire. And within it there were figures resembling 4 living creatures, this was their appearance. They had human form. Each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and their feet were like calf's hooves, and they sparkled like polished bronze. Under their wings on the 4 sides were human hands. As for the faces and the wings of the 4 of them, their wings touched one another. Their faces did not turn when they moved. Each went straight forward. As for the form of their faces, each had a human face. All 4 had the face of a lion on the right, and the face of a bull on the left, and all 4 had the face of an eagle. Such were their faces. Their wings were spread out above. Each had 2 touching one another, and 2 covering their bodies, and each went straight forward. Wherever their spirit was about to go, they would go, without turning as they went. In the midst of the living beings, there was something that looked like burning coals of fire, like torches moving among the living beings. The fire was bright, the lightning was flashing in the fire, and lightning like in Revelation, and the living beings ran back and forth like bolts of lightning. And as I looked at the living beings, behold, there was one wheel on the ground beside the living beings for each of the 4 of them. The appearance of the wheels and their workmanship was like sparkling topaz, and all 4 of them had the same form, their appearance and workmanship being as if one wheel moved within another. Whenever they moved in any of the 4 directions without turning as they moved. As for their rims, they were high and awesome, and the rims of the 4 of them were covered with eyes all around. Whenever the living beings moved, the wheels moved with them, and whenever the living beings arose from the earth, the wheels arose also. Where the spirit was about to go, they would go in that direction. The wheels rose just as they did, for the spirit of the living beings was in the wheels. Whenever those, that's verses. Whenever those went, they went, and whenever those stopped, they stopped. And whenever they rose from the earth, the wheels rose just as they did, for the spirit of the living being was in the wheels. Now Isaiah chapter 6. I think there's only like 10 verses here. In the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, lofty and exalted, with the train of his robe filling the temple. Seraphim were standing above him, each having 6 wings, with 2 each covering his face, and with 2 each covering his feet, and with 2 each flew. And one called out to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of armies. The whole earth is full of his glory, and the foundation of the thresholds trembled at the voice of him who called out, while the temple was filled with smoke. And then I said, Woe to me, for I am ruined, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of armies. Then one of the seraphim flew to me, and with a burning coal in his hand, which he had taken from the altar of tongues, he touched my mouth with it and said, Behold, this has touched your lips, and your guilt is taken away, and atonement is made for your sin. Now for Daniel. This one's going to be lengthier, but it's Honestly, it's one of my favorite passages in Scripture. So it's really informative for really the Gospels in general. So it's probably around 20, 25 verses or so. So just keep that in mind for your own sanity. Daniel chapter 7, verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions in his mind, and as he lay on his bed, he wrote the dream down and told the following summary of it. Daniel said, I was looking in my vision by night, and behold, 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. The 4 great beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion, but had the wings of an eagle. I kept looking into his wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the ground, and set up on 2 feet like a man. A human mind also was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one, resembling a bear. It was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. And they said this to it, Arise, devour much meat. After this I kept looking, and behold, another one like a leopard, which also had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible and extremely strong, and it had large iron teeth, and it devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. And while I was thinking about the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the previous horns were plucked out before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like human eyes, and a mouth uttering great boasts. And I kept looking until thrones were set up, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool, and his throne was ablaze with flames, and its wheels were a burning fire. A river of fire was flowing and coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands were serving him, and myriads upon myriads were standing before him. The court convened, and the books were open. Then I kept looking because the sound of the boastful words which the horn was speaking. And I kept looking until the beast was killed, and its body was destroyed and given to the burning fire. As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but an extension of life was granted to them for an appointed period of time. And I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, and with the clouds of heaven, one like a son of man was coming. And he came up to the Ancient of Days, and he was presented before him. And to him was given dominion, honor, and a kingdom, so that all peoples, nations, and populations of all languages might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed. Thought I had more of that. That's fine, though. So yeah, the Ancient of Days, we have this individual coming, the Son of Man. You know, Jesus identifies himself with this individual, one like a Son of Man that was coming here. As I said, we can't get into all of the specifics, but you can see how the throne scene of Revelation 4-5 is familiar. If you're familiar with Daniel, with Isaiah, with Ezekiel, really even other literature, Jewish literature outside of the Bible, they're probably drawing from the Daniel, Isaiah, Ezekiel text as well. But this is something that, while it would be full of awe and amazing, it's also something not entirely foreign to people that be reading this. Maybe Jewish Christians would need to tell their Greek Christian brethren what's going on or why this matters, but this is not something that's entirely foreign. Some call these moments that we've read divine council scenes, where God is witnessed by an individual with other heavenly beings, with other people surrounding him. In Daniel, we saw the other thrones that were set up aside from the Ancient of Days, and we see Isaiah. There's other people. If you remember the rest of the passage, God is saying, "Who's going to go for us? Who's the us? Who's he talking to? Was Isaiah the only person? Well, there might have been other individuals there. So this is why people think there's a kind of a divine council scene idea in this area. Also, these scenes are often judgments being passed. We saw that in the book of Daniel. We see that the beast is being killed, this horrible beast that's being boastful, and these other kingdoms are also being judged. We would see that in Isaiah for the people that will not listen. So these things are common, and there's frequent things. I wish myself I could have studied more of that, but alas, here we are. All right, not the fourth thing I told you about. Let's talk about the emperor. Because that is what these Christians are going through. They're potentially facing this persecution from the Roman Empire or from the Jews around that are kicking them out of the synagogues. But especially the emperor. When you live in an empire that boasts so much about itself, that is the great, I'll tell you this now, whenever you see Babylon, and I at this point, that's synonymous for me, that's Rome. That's this empire that is so boastful, that everyone thinks is so mighty and so powerful. So when you think about the throne and the emperor who's on the throne, what John's telling you is, no, it's actually God's the one that's on the throne. He's the one that is being sovereign here. There's a few things, there are many things within Revelation 4 to 5 that would remind first century readers of the emperor. The most obvious one is, as we talked about, is the throne. Who sits on the throne, who's here. You might think maybe in some cities the big thrones that are set up for Zeus or what other foreign god. But by and large, it's the emperor who would also, especially Domitian, if this is written in 96, around the time of 96, then Domitian, he actually wanted to be addressed as Lord and God. Did I say that right? Something to that extent. So he really pushed that agenda more than even other emperors had. And as we've noticed before in Revelation, the message that Rome is not in charge, the message is that Rome is not in charge, but rather it is God. A few things here. It was Roman practice to carry sacred fire, as it would be called, before the emperor. And if you look at Revelation 4:5, we see that there's fire set before. Lesser kings, when they were before the emperor, they would lay down their crowns before the emperor to show their submission. So again, you see this scene and you're like, oh, I've seen this before. I've heard of this. The king of my city, when he went to go visit the emperor, this is what he did to show that who was truly sovereign. But now these elders are saying, no, we know who's really in charge here. The title of worthy are you, it's actually not, that specific phrase and title is not found in the Old Testament, but it is a title that was claimed by Emperor Domitian. And we see that this is what they say about God in Revelation 4:11. And also, when the emperors traveled, communities would often send representatives to go meet them, and sometimes they would be dressed in white. So when you see when we're told that the elders are dressed in white, I didn't give you a verse for that, but that the elders, I believe, are dressed in white, you're painting a picture and you're saying, I feel like I've seen these things. I've seen these things about the emperor who's potentially causing all sorts of problems for my Christian community. So it's not the emperor who's in charge. It's God who's in charge here. As we've seen with previous examples, Revelation is telling us who is truly sovereign. It's not Rome, but God. And in this case, it is God the Father, because we've mostly been talking here about chapter 4. But something really interesting happens in Revelation chapter 5, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Any questions? Any comments there? Kind of making some sense there, I hope. Okay. Let's talk about the elders. Golly, there's no way I could have read everything, all the resources I had about chapters 4 and 5 in this just past week. There's so much good stuff that we could have talked about and gotten into. But elders is one topic that often gets brought up. These elders that are that are on the throne surrounding the throne of God. There's a lot of thoughts regarding the elders and a lot of uncertainty. A lot of times when I'm presenting something, I feel a lot more confident in it when a lot of my commentaries will agree. But it's not even that my commentaries don't agree, but all of them even present multiple options saying it's not entirely clear what is going on here. And a lot of times it's, people are pretty confident that multiple things are going on at the same time. John is using the same image for different things. So while it could be true, we have to be a little bit careful here. So there's a lot. But there are some things that I do want to point out. Some of the things that people ask about these elders is, who are they? Why are there 24? Are they humans or are they heavenly creatures? Etc. Oh man, I could get into so much. How much time? I don't have much time. Okay. There's so much. Why are there 24? Well, First Chronicles, maybe there was 24 priestly orders. Some people say maybe it's representing the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 apostles, representing kind of these, both testamental periods, so to speak. There's even speculation that the emperor had 24 representatives of foreign religions, so it's just adding further to that emperor imagery. I couldn't find as many sources that would talk about that, so I'm a little hesitant on that. But the point is, there's so many reasons why there might have been 24. Were they human or heavenly? We're obviously not going to talk about all of the possibilities, but I want to bring up at least a few things to consider. Remember that the 7 letters really inform the rest of the reading of Revelation. They really, we got to keep in mind, we should keep reading them as we go on through this class, because those 7 letters are going to God is so much. Revelation 3:5. This is I forget which. Let's see, 3:5. Which church was this one? The one before Philadelphia, the church of Sardis. 3:5 says, "The one who overcomes will be clothed the same way, in white garments, and I will not erase his name from the book of life. And I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels." Revelation 2:10. This is written to the church in Smyrna. "Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, so that you will be tested, and you will have tribulation for 10 days. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life." Revelation 3:21. This is to the church in Laodicea. "The one who overcomes, I will grant to him to sit with me on my throne, as I also overcame and sat with my Father on his throne." There's one more. I actually didn't list on here. Is it Smyrna, maybe? It's going to bug me. There's one more where I believe there's this promise of an open door or a key or something. This idea of a door to pass through. And if you see the way Revelation 4:1 says, the way it begins says, "After these things I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven." So even more, this imagery of the door will be open. I think it was to a church in Philadelphia. Sorry, it's going to bug me. Let me just try to read this real quick. Because Philadelphia is the church that has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, and who shuts and no one will open. So this message of this door is open to you. If you remember when we talked about that, we talked about how they were possibly being kicked out of the synagogue and being told, "You don't belong here." But their promise at the very end is, "You'll be a pillar in the temple of my God. He will not go out from it anymore. You'll be part of the new city." And he tells them that he's the one that holds the keys, not these other Jews that say they're Jews but are really not. So all this to say, there's a lot of imagery already from the 7 letters that we find within chapters 4 and 5, and especially talking about the elders, these things that I just read, wearing white, having crowns, sitting on the thrones. These are all promises that were given to the overcomers. The elders, and the elders in this case are also a great contrast to the dragon that will later come in Revelation. As Alex pointed out, the dragon wishes to keep his crown, while the elders willingly recognize the sovereignty of God. While they've earned their prize, while they have overcome, while they now reign, seemingly, they still submit to the one who is truly sovereign above all. So I just want to make that comment about the elders. There's a lot of things, but it was like, oh yeah, the way these guys are being described, we know, we've been told who's going to get these blessings as well. So really, I guess it kind of pushes me in the direction of thinking these are representative of believers, of those who have overcome. But just a thought there. Now let's talk about Jesus in chapter 5 with our last few minutes we have here. We hear in chapter 5 about a scroll in the right hand of God. No one is found that can open the scroll until Revelation 5:5. "And one of the elders said to me, 'Stop weeping. Behold, the Lion that is from the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has overcome, so as to be able to open the scroll and its 7 seals.'" I want us to pay attention to this part. Here is one of my favorite rhetorical details of Revelation. It happens multiple times in Revelation. So I have a question for you guys here. Just on this verse that we have here. What is it that John hears? What does he hear? I've got the verse up there. Revelation 5:5. ¿Qué escucha? Well, what is he told? He's sitting there weeping and he hears something. So based off what he's heard, what is he expecting here? The lion, yes. He's sitting there weeping, and one of the elders said to him as he's hearing, "Hey, don't worry, the lion that is from the tribe of Judah, the root of David." This is awesome. We've been waiting for the Messiah for forever. We've been waiting for the lion, for the tribe of Judah. We've been waiting for this great thing to happen. And what does he see when he turns around? He sees between the throne with the 4 living creatures and the elders a lamb standing as if slaughtered. having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. One of the shorter commentaries I own is actually called A Theology of Hearing, because this happens later on, especially with the question of the 144,000. We'll talk about that when we get there, but you hear, John says he hears that this army, this 4,000, he hears this 144,000, this, seemingly this army that's coming, the language that's used there kind of reminds you of that. But when he turns around, he sees people from every nation. He sees people that are innumerable. So he's hearing, this symbolic number of, there's, maybe 12 by 12 and, 1,000 and so many. We see this great force. What is God's army going to look like at this final battle? He turns around and it's just people from every nation worshiping, all of these things going on. And likewise here, it's kind of turning things a little bit on your head of, hey, I'm expecting this lion. I see what's around me. I see the emperor, his armies. I see, the peace that was gained through bloodshed. And we're going to need something just as powerful. We need a lion to come. But he turns around and he sees someone that's actually a lamb. Not exactly the greatest symbol of power. You see someone that was slaughtered. You see that the world might think this, confusing to the world, but he's saying this is the one who is worthy, who does things a different way than what the world tells you is supposed to be happening. We're going to explore this a little, probably more in a few weeks coming, but this happens a few times where there's this difference between what is heard and what is seen. Often with Revelation, we get the idea that we need to understand the world as it really is. Not the way that the world that we might see every day around us, who's truly winning, but we need to, John's trying to tell his listeners, his readers, hey, let me tell you how the world really is, and God's in control. He is the one that is sovereign in this case. Here we might be expecting the mighty lion, but we see the slaughtered lamb. And was the hearing wrong? No, it wasn't wrong, but it didn't look like what the world would have been expecting. He's still the lion, this mighty source of power, but it's different than what you might expect. For the lamb's followers, we too are not supposed to look like the forces of the world. When I talked about the 144,000, we'll get more into that when we get to those that chapter. But I think likewise, we get this message. It's not supposed to look like the forces of the world. We overcome in a very different way. The way that these churches are supposed to overcome here, it's never through this, taking up a battle and, killing all the infidels, so to speak, but it's those that remain faithful. Christ's death seemed, even Christ, our ultimate example, his death seemed like defeat, but was actually victory. So why would John see a slaughtered lamb here? The imagery can evoke a lot of Old Testament themes. Obviously, the Passover lamb, the Exodus 12 and the Exodus, and there's this mention of I'll make you a kingdom of priests, and that's language from the Exodus. But that's also language we find in the letters in the book of Revelation, making you a kingdom of priests. There's also the servant song of Isaiah, where you remember Isaiah 53, where it says, "A lamb that is led to the slaughter," and one of my favorite Old Testament prophecies is Abraham when he's sacrificing Isaac. When Isaac tells him, "Where is the lamb?" and Abraham says, "God will provide." If you read the story carefully, what God actually provides for that sacrifice for Abraham is a ram. But when Isaac says, "Where is the lamb?" I like that. I think that that's really prophetic there. Isaac saying, "Where is the lamb?" They don't actually get the lamb. At least not. They get the ram for that sacrifice. But Abraham says God will provide, and now we have the true lamb. If you don't want to go with me there, I'm fine with that. But that's just kind of, to me, that's really, really interesting, and I think I'm behind that idea. All right, Revelation 4:5. We're almost done here. Also remember that in the last chapter, chapter 4, God is being honored and is being worshipped. He said that he is worthy. And look who's receiving that now. Revelation 5:8. And when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each one holding a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And 5:13. And I heard every creature, every created thing which is in heaven or on the earth and under the earth or on the sea and all things in them, saying, "To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be the blessing, the honor, the glory, the dominion forever and ever." And the 4 living creatures were saying, "Amen." And the elders fell down and worshipped. a reminder that the Lamb is not powerless. It has 7 horns, which is indicative of its power. It has 7 eyes, which many take to mean omniscience, like seeing all that's around, which is what you want out of, if you're a people that's being persecuted, you want to know that God is always there watching. Oh, he is aware of all the suffering you're going through. Next week, we're going to read about the 7 seals. We know that the Lamb is worthy to open these seals. So we're going to hopefully cover all of that next week. But we'll see. I still need to do a lot more reading on that. So that's all I have. Any last questions? Any comments? 2 chapters here.
I was thinking when you mentioned like the idea of the difference between what is heard and what is seen, like the point is to show how reality actually looks like in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Made me think like there's when the symbols becomes real in a way, because when you see and think like, oh, you have the emperor of Rome, like he has all the power, he has everything, it's difficult to see the reality behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you cannot see it. Like it is the guy with all the power. So when you see the symbols in a way they're showing you the actual reality of things. So it becomes real. Like the symbols become the reality, not in a way that the symbols are real, like literally real, but they show you what is behind with the thing you cannot see.
Yeah.
With simple eyes.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the church needs to be reminded of in this moment. I'll make a little tongue-in-cheek comment here. Where'd it go? Is this 5:9? Oh, am I in the wrong chapter? No, it's the right chapter. Okay, I guess I won't since I don't have it. Oh yeah, here we go. Revelation 5:9. And they sang a new song, saying, "Worthy are you to take the scroll and to break its seals." So these are the elders who are before the Lamb, holding a harp, full of incense, and which are the prayers of the saints. This is actually all priestly language here, which is having a harp. To have a harp, to have the bowl of incense. This kind of also kingdom of priests sort of language, if you're thinking of the elders in that way. Also, it's the only other one of the 5 places that use that word for singing that's famous used in the Church of Christ for why we should sing. And it's just, to me, it's always been interesting in Revelation that we have also this mention of that, but also kind of with harps there. So make of that what you will. But that's I meant to make a point of that whenever we got to that chapter. So, all right. With that being said, I think we're dismissed for worship. Thanks, everyone. Dígame.